Hello and welcome. I hope your coffee is warm because today we are building a Sultai deck. And Sultai is a really exciting color combination because in my estimation it has everything you need: card draw, ramp and great removal. So let's get in. First of all, let's talk about what Sultai is and whether it fits with your own philosophy maybe. So its philosophy is that it will win eventually. It doesn't need to win right now, it will plan for the future to win sometime then. Also, they believe in the circle of life, not only in death and reanimation, which is of course a big theme in many Magic the Gathering decks, but also in the fact that being alive right now is just as important as being dead and then coming back. So it's kind of the Golgari way of life, but it also thinks about that future and plans towards it, and plans in which way it will return later. The colors are blue, green and black. Blue means that Sultai are calculated, prepared. They always prepare, they scheme, they want to know how they will defeat their opponents and how it will be as fun as possible to do so. They will manipulate evolution. They will look at nature and improve it, like the Simic, of course, which is within their colors. And they love to be playful in their trickery. They are green for their teaming life power. Their life power is always growing. Their life power is always important to them. Snakes. This is maybe a little bit of a small theme, more like it. But it is very much the most demure creature of nature. And combat strength sometimes oozes, but mostly the oozes that you want to make a religion around. The last color is black because they are all about the dead, not necessarily the dirty zombies, but the ones that are venerated and honored. They are about outlasting their opponents. They want to win. They want to be politically active, but they mostly want to be the last one laughing. And they are all about desecration because they look at maybe Orzhov religion and they see it and they think, how can we turn this to our advantage? It is not white or red. It's not white because it thinks honesty really isn't real. And it wants to strive over the collective. It wants to rule over it more than finding it important at all. And it isn't red because it values the future over the present. And it feels like feelings are holding you back. So what to expect in this video? We will talk about the strengths and weaknesses of this color combination. We will talk about the top 10 commanders of their archetypes. I don't necessarily do 10 every time, but this time we do because there are 10 and 10 good ones. And we will talk about how to win actually with this deck, how to build a good core of your Sultai decks, and we will give you some play style tips. I hope you enjoy it. Again, I hope your coffee is still warm or you've already finished it, and let's begin. So, before we talk about the strengths and weaknesses, we need to talk about the all-round purpose of Sultai. So Sultai is really good at controlling the board or even countering stuff. It's not the best. I think you would need to be in something is it then, but it still has great control because black is a great removal color and green can round it out by removing enchantments and artifacts really well. Also, it is about big threats because it has black and green for the big power and sometimes big toughness. And adding blue to green also means that sometimes you can have some very great flying threats as well. Or at least unblockable stuff. So it's all about big threats and it's about forcing aggressive strategies to go against it. Aggressive strategies will need to focus the Sultai down. And this just means if your playgroup is a bit too aggressive, this is a great color combination against it. For its strengths, it's great at ramp because it has green. It's great at graveyard synergies because of the Golgari color combination. It's great at card draw because of the Dimir color combination. And it's great at stealing resources, which is very much Sultai all the way. Its weaknesses are its early defense, because it really isn't great in defending with creatures that are smaller. Green and black more so are about big creatures that are way bigger. It is also true that Sultai decks can get a bit complex. Often they have multiple synergies, which will fail if your hand gets disrupted too much, or people can find your combo and play around it or against it. So the mindset will be to just play classical commander, honestly. You have value, removal and ramp, which are all the components you need for a great commander game. Do note that you need to be smart about your game plan, and perhaps if your opponents do know what your game plan is, make sure that you are playing against them, playing against you. That's how far you need to think ahead. The most popular commander within its theme for Sultai is the Wise Mothman, and it doesn't even have that many decks in it, but it's +1 counters for this commander. It does feel like a mill deck more like it, but I feel like the game plan is getting the +1 counts on your creatures and winning through that, and having a lot of value, which is definitely something Sultai wants to do. So the plan: you have a flying 3/3 commander that whenever it enters or attacks, each player gets a red counter. Doesn't really do anything, I think. Whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, put a +1 counter on each of up to X target creatures, where X is the number of non-land cards milled this way. So what you want to do is you want to have a bunch of creatures that love having +1 counters put onto them. So for example, a new one, which is Pensive Professor, says whenever one or more +1 counters are put on this creature, you draw a card. So it's very easy to mill one card, then you will put 1 +1 counter on the Professor, and you will draw a card. And you will need many more effects like this. Also, things that work are Proliferate, or of course things that will allow you to mill your opponents whenever they, for example, lose life with Mindcrank. So that's it for this one. Overtime, which is Sultai's favorite word. This commander, I think, is the most popular, really, in amount of decks made for him. Or her. I think it's her. Muldrotha, the Gravetide. This commander is great as reanimation, and definitely would go into many other Sultai decks as a value engine in this way. But in a dedicated deck, you will play Muldrotha in a way that you play very small creatures or enchantments or stuff like that you can then play over and over. Because for each permanent type from your graveyard, you may play it once each turn. So for example, you can play 1 creature, 1 enchantment, 1 artifact, and 1 battle from there. So for example, Spore Frog is very famous for playing with Muldrotha because it's very annoying. You can play this creature frog every turn, and then you can make sure that your opponents won't be able to deal combat damage to you, but you can kill their creature still, of course, if they attack into you and you have some great defenders. Other than that, we have a new addition, which is the Moleman Moloid Master from the Marvel set, which allows you to play lands from your graveyard, of course, but also has the Landfall ability to create a 1/1 minion that mills a card whenever it attacks. Definitely a great addition to Sultai decks. The real mill commander, I think, is Teval, the Balance Skill. This one is very balanced in the way that it doesn't really stand for anything, but I think it's mill most of all. And actually this one is known for Reanimator, really. But Teval, let's talk about it, says whenever Teval attacks, you mill 3 cards and then you may return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Now, is this mill or is this really a way to get lands back? Well, I think this is more like a mill commander because of the second ability, which says whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. So is this mill? Well, this is more like self-mill, I would say. And in the self-mill archetype, of course, you just want to make sure that you have a bunch of things in your graveyard, and then you will reanimate it most of all. But I think this one is poised better to just get value from having cards in your graveyard at all. Of course, you can still play Muldrotha or other things that reanimate very well and get value from it. But I think you will want to win with the milling itself in this deck. Now, who would have guessed that Sultai was great at Voltron as a commander? Well, because of this new-ish addition, just like Teval, I guess, Kotis the Fangkeeper, which is a 2/1, which doesn't feel very Voltron yet, but it has indestructible on the get-go, so it is very hard to remove, of course. And then whenever Kotis deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top X cards of their library, where X is the amount of damage dealt, and you may cast any number of spells with mana value X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. So this is very strong in the way that it helps you to steal your opponent's stuff and make sure that you have strong things from it, but you will need a lot of combat damage coming from Kotis, so that is why Voltron works well here. It is more value-based Voltron than anything, but that is just the Sultai way. So in this deck, you will just make Kotis stronger, steal your opponent's stuff, and then make sure that, well, Kotis sticks around, and maybe you will kill your opponents with Kotis anyways. There's a lot of unblockable in this color combination, so you should be able to do this. Next up is one that is very strong and even is cEDH potential. So if you want to start off with a commander that is just very good and just plays well in good stuff, Glarb Calamity's Augur is definitely a great way to start. It is great in a mid-range type of deck because you can look at the top card of your library at any time, play very big spells from there, so anything with mana value 4 or greater you can play from there, and then it has a tap ability to surveil 2 to get the things you want on top of your library in the right order, or maybe get it into your graveyard and reanimate it again. So you can see that it is really a big theme to be able to reanimate stuff. But Glarb, as I said, I think is most interesting because it could be a cEDH commander. Now, how does this work? In this case, actually, you aren't really looking for that ability to play things from the top of your library, maybe lands, but more so you are looking, you like looking at the top card of your library at any time, and you like or really need the Surveil 2 ability. Now, in this deck, you can work around some type of combo around Thessa's Oracle, of course, very popular way to win if you have an empty library or close to that. And then Doomsday, which allows you to exile almost everything from your library and graveyard except for 5 cards, and you will put those 5 cards on top of your library in any order. Then you can surveil some cards, maybe play some lands from the top of it, and then win with Thessa's Oracle again. Now, there are more ways to win and more combo stuff, but mostly here this commander is great because it will give you a lot of interaction, a lot of value because you can play from the top of your library and surveil every time, and it can be very explosive in its combos. Plus, because you have so much interaction, this will be great in the cEDH meta because you will be able to stop your opponents, of course. Simone and Dina are another value commander. This is because they are great in landfall decks or maybe lands matter decks, but only because they put some lands onto the battlefield for you, or they help you with having drawing be a great thing. Because Simone and Dina say whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, so you are incentivized to draw a lot, which of course you want to do. And then the ability to sacrifice another creature, draw a card, and put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped is great, but it can also be doubled if you have 8 or more lands out. So it wants to sacrifice some creatures, yes, but then also get a lot of cards into your hand, get a lot of lands onto the battlefield, and that is a great combination of things for a value deck that focuses on landfall abilities. Maralen is a new addition to the Sultai suite, let's say. And this one is more of a typo commander, but it's weird enough so that I will mention it. This one works with Elves. And Maralen says whenever Maralen or another Elf or Fairy, if you want, enters, you exile the top 2 cards of your of target opponent's library. And then once each turn you may cast a spell with mana value less than or equal to the number of elves you control from among cards exiled with Maralen this turn without paying its mana cost. Now there are more decks being built around fairies, but I feel like elves are better, so I'm mentioning it like that. I feel like elves are easier to play, they're often stronger, and they have a sort of typo synergy that works very well already. And still you can play some fairies in this deck. So for example, Obira, the Dreaming Duelist, is great because whenever another fairy enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. Yes, but mostly because it has flash. And then you can play another fairy on your opponent's turn so that you can exile the top 2 of your opponent's library. Then maybe they have put something on top of it, or you know that you want it, or maybe they have scryed, and then you can surprise your opponents by stealing those things. Gonti is, I guess, the second commander that does well with theft, but this one steals your opponent's stuff and rewards you for it. So Gonti says spells you cast but don't own cost 1 less to cast, so it's actually easier to cast your opponent's stuff than your own. And whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you look at the top card of their library, then exile it face down, and you may play it for as long as it remains exiled. And mana of any type can be spent to cast it, for in the case that you want to play anything Boros or something, if that would ever happen. So this is great. You want to steal your opponent's stuff. You want other things that steal your opponent's stuff, and then they will be easier to cast. You will get a cost reduction and you will steal more stuff because you have more stuff to attack your opponents with. So it's a loop that feels very rewarding. Zaxara is a great budget commander, I feel. This one is very easy to build as well. It works with X spells, and they have gotten a very great upgrade in the last few months with the Strixhaven deck that was all about this as well. It is even perhaps better as a commander than the other X spells that were featured in that deck, because it adds the black color on top of the Simic one. This one says you add 2 mana of any one color. This is also great for many combos that allow it to untap, perhaps for 1 mana, then you have infinite mana immediately. And whenever you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, you create a 0/0 green Hydra creature token and then put X +1 counters on it. Because of this, you could also play Zaxara as a great Hydra commander, the Hydra creature type. So I prefer this way. I think many other people do, because X spells are just very interesting in the way that you have a lot of choices to make whenever you are playing one. So I feel like this is a very interesting commander. It also works with cards that are otherwise not that good. X spells usually are a bit overcosted, but in this case, of course, they give you some extra value, and then they are exactly not overpriced. Yeah, it just helps you a lot in the way that this becomes a very cheap deck that you can probably play for less than $50. And Yarok, which was, I think, released as a Brawl commander, but is very interesting because it doubles ETB triggers. This one, I feel like, should work with ETBs. Many other people are playing it with a Landfall theme, which is, of course, also an ETB. But I feel like Landfall is overdone, and it is very interesting that this actually works with ETB effects. And again, in the same way that X spells weren't that expensive, many ETB effects aren't expensive either. So you can play this as a very cheap commander too, but this one has a way higher ceiling in that there are also many cards that are very good that have ETBs, and then this becomes a great toolbox value commander. Now, if you answer these 4 questions in the comments below, I will help you choose your Sultai commander. So I have 4 questions. First, creature. Do you want to focus on creatures, or do you want to focus on non-creatures? Now, I also have the question, do you want to focus on nature or evil, which is more like a theme question. Do you want to outlast your opponents, or do you want to make sure your opponents do not last. Also, do you want huge threats, or do you want many threats? And with this, I can choose your commander for you. For combos, I have two. The first is Goldkeeper, which is Sultai already, and then Tortured Existence. So how does this work? Well, you have Goldkeeper and Tortured Existence on the battlefield. You do need a creature card in your hand and a creature card in your graveyard, so you can swap them. And then you will just need to pay 1 black mana to choose and discard that creature card that you have in your hand. Then return a target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And then Goldkeeper will trigger and say, whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard during your turn, you create a treasure token with which you can then again use the Tortured Existence to swap those creatures. That is why you need 2. And if this will allow you to have an enter the battlefield effect or a leave the battlefield effect or something like that, you can do that infinitely. Otherwise, you will get infinite discard triggers, infinite in general enter the battlefield triggers and stuff like that. So you can definitely very easily go off in a Sultai deck. And this one I talked a bit about before. Zaxara has a great combo ability whenever you have the ability to untap Zaxara for at most 1 mana. So for example, Freed from the Real is a 3 mana enchantment that you can put on Zaxara, where you can tap Zaxara for 2 mana of any one color, let's say blue, and then you can untap Zaxara again to again tap it for 2 mana, and you can do this infinitely to eventually get every color you want, so black, green and blue, and then you will be able to, well, do anything you want. Definitely if you are playing the X-Spells deck, because then you will get something big at least. Maybe you draw your whole deck, play all of the things, attack immediately and then win that way. So many ways to win the game from that moment on, and I feel like that is just a very fun way to go out. Now, to build the core of any Sultai deck, and any deck at all, you will need ramp. And in this case, you will have the green ramp, of course, which means Farseek or Cultivate, with which you can very quickly ramp and always works in green. You have some suite of reanimation ramp like Sakura Tribe Elder, which of course also green, but helps because it can be sacrificed and then played again. Or you have the Graveyard Lands Matter, which needs cards like I Still Explorer and Life from the Loam to sacrifice lands, get lands back, and get landfall triggers, for example, like that. Now, for removal, you will need a combination of these things. The Golgari suite will allow you to have great removal like Assassin's Trophy. Then you have blue counter spells if you want. These sort of fight each other. So you either, I think, want to go the Golgari removal route or the counterspell route with blue. And then you want some, in any case, green anti-non-creature removal like Beast Within or Boseiju who endures, which can help you remove the things that black cannot, or sometimes can be great extra removal if you didn't get that blue counterspell out in time. For board wipes, I think you will find enough in the Golgari board wipe suite, like Calling Ritual or the black board wipes like Toxic Deluge, and you will be pretty good at it. And then I renamed this Value Advantage so that it isn't Card Advantage, because people will be very mad at me if I call it that. So you have Golgari Reanimation, which isn't draw, which is just great at reanimating stuff. So it will add value and get things out of your graveyard to use it again. Sultai has definitely great reanimation on its own, like Muldrotha, the Gravetide, and then there's Drawl, which is blue, which is very good at this, for example, the Rhystic Studies of the world. And then Sultai Drawl, I think, is really good as well, like Villainous Wealth, which is great in the Theft archetype, but outside of there as well. And then for protection, you will go the colorless shoes like Lightning Greaves, and then green protection like Heroic Intervention to stop your opponents from killing your creatures in any case. Now, last but not least, how to play Sultai actually? Well, First of all, you have value and ramp plus great removal. So this is just classic commander overpoweredness. If you're not in cEDH, just enjoy your power over others and work towards your game plan. But be ready to apologize, because people will feel like you might be too strong in too casual environments. If you are playing Glarb in cEDH, you are still being a classical commander player, gaining advantage over time and removing everything. That is of course important enough. You now will also be a combo commander, but more so because you have so much value that you can play your combos out anyways. Note that from cEDH we learned that Sultai is very easy to stop, because people know when you are going off and people will know what your combo will be or what your game plan is. So they will read the signs and easily stop you at that point. This will be true in casual too, because at this point you will be ramping, which is a very clear example of why you need to be stopped. And oftentimes the aggro players will focus you because of it. Now I want to thank you for watching, and I wish you a very nice day. Bye.